Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Know-How is brought to you by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
On this episode of Know-How, it's the best of 2014. Welcome to Know-How. It's the Twit show where we build, bend, break, and upgrade. I'm Father Robert Ballas.
I'm Brian Burnett.
And we've got a little something special for you. Somewhere like a time machine of sorts.
Yes, we will be looking back at 2014 and the best knowledge filling that we have done.
Of the whole
year.
Yeah. So without further ado, here's the best of 2014. Go. Let's go into the NAS box. Now, in the time that that video ran, it fully installed itself, and it gave us this. You're not going to get a neat graphical user interface. It basically just gives you 11 options, none of which you really need except for shutdown.
Well, yeah, and you don't need this. You don't care about.
Yep.
You need this number down here. Then you can unplug the monitor and never actually use this monitor again. Put it somewhere else. Use it somewhere else. Do it. Just this is what you care about. And if you log into 192.168.1.115, we should have something glorious, something
so
exciting.
if you go to my computer, Brian, you're going to see we get this. Now, the very first thing it's going to ask you to do is it's going to ask you to change the password, because do not use 1234. Give it something interesting like, oh, I don't know, how about know-how? No one's going to guess that. There we go. Oh, well, actually, you know what's good? If you type it the same way. There we go. So now what we've got is we've got this is a fully reinstalled system. It's fresh. There's nothing in here from any previous installations. Patrick, what's the first thing I'm going to do?
Set a username and password.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming that I'm going to go where?
Probably up to the account.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So I jump in. Oh, look at that. I've got groups and users. Assuming I jump into an add user here. Now, why do I have to do this?
Because the people at BSD and FreeNAS said you had to do this.
Okay. Good. Yeah, actually, this is going to set up. This is where I'm going to tell the FreeNAS who should be able to access the volumes and the shares that are on my computer.
I mean, it's essentially the glory of this is you have the ability to control who has access to what and what file systems and what areas of the box. But you do that by essentially creating individual user accounts, either for everyone or one generic user account that you allow everyone to access. That's if you trust everybody in your house. But if you want to do things like have different parts of your FreeNAS where, let's say, the Padre has his backup area and I have my backup area, and then we have a common area where people can upload files and transfer things, and another common area that's read access only so we can download or stream things. It all comes down to setting up users.
Right. So I've got Blackrobe added into my user. Actually, if you see right here, you'll see that that user has now been added. This is also a place where I could delete users. Let's say someone moves on. I don't want them to be able to access my shares anymore. I just drop them right out of here. Now, I've just added a user, but I don't have anything set up on the drives yet, right?
Well, you also have to set up a primary group, and to do that in the most basic form, would set the primary group and set that up as the wheel. So Blackrobe would be part of the group.
So you know what? We're going to call it the wheel. Yay! So we've got a group and we've got a user.
So, if you're a sophisticated power user, you can use Active Directory Server or Open LDAP and merge that in there. We're assuming since you're watching this, you're not. But your next step is, generally speaking, to set up disks. So you've set up a user, you've got an account going, and now we want to take a look at the disks.
So we're going to go down to the Storage tab here, and I believe the first thing we have to do is set up a volume?
Yeah, you're going to take a look at what, you can make sure your operating system, your FreeNAS install, can see everything. And somewhere in there should be
the ZFS Volume Manager.
Now, if you're using ZFS, I want to tell you two things. You want to have a fairly recent processor, and you want to have several gigabytes of RAM. Now, we could argue about this, but generally speaking, I'm following what the FreeBSD community says, which is you have if you want to do ZFS, which is really cool, which is redundant drives, which is basically the ability to survive multiple drive crashes, you need a whole bunch of drives, at least 4. 10 would be better. Long story there. Let's not go into it. But you want to make sure you have enough memory and enough computing power so that it does not take several decades for you to replicate the lost data.
Now, this is bare bones minimum. This is 4 gigabytes of memory. That's actually horrible. I'd say 8 is the minimum that I'd want to run, and I'd say 8 would be my baseline, and then I would add 1 gigabyte for every terabyte above that baseline.
If you are talking about building a less expensive system, you're probably not going to use ZFS. If you're recycling old hardware, you're going to use UFS. It's going to restrict the number of plugins you have. You also want to check out something called NAS for free, which is essentially another distribution or version. Like if you're familiar with Linux, there's like Linux, but there's like this Linux and that Linux and the other Linux and Bob's Linux Part 2. Well, essentially, FreeNAS kind of does the same thing. NAS for free is something a lot of people really enjoy if they're setting up older hardware, less expensive machines, have less money to put into it.
Right.
Where were we?
Well, we were talking about ZFS volume. So we're in the ZFS volume manager right now, and I've given it a volume name of KH. I could encrypt it if I really felt like it. I'm not going to do it on this one because I don't want it to take forever. But Patrick, what's this little thing down here?
Oh boy.
Slider.
I just slide that all the way to the take it all. Take all the space.
Yeah, so we've got 4 drives in this array. I'm telling it to take all 4. One of the things I really like about FreeNAS is it will tell you what is the optimal setup. So right now it's telling me to use a RAID Z2. I'll get 3.63 terabytes effective data, which means I'm using a hot spare and parity. So I could lose up to 2 drives of this array, and I'm not going to lose any data.
Which is a really beautiful thing. So, if you come from the Windows world, you probably spend a lot of time ignoring the recommendations the operating systems make. In the case of FreeNAS, do what the nice operating system tells you to do unless you know better.
Right. Now, we talked about scary RAID. I could run this in a Stripe, and look at that. I get all the storage space. I'd get 7.27 terabytes, but of course, if I lose a single drive.
I felt a disturbance in the forest, as if someone lost terabytes of irreplaceable data.
Don't ever do this, please. I don't even know why they put that in there. You shouldn't be allowed to select it.
Some people, a FreeNAS box, an external hard drive, this is not a backup solution or system. This is storage, right? A backup solution is a copy on the system, a copy locally, and a copy stored somewhere else. So you have multiple copies of your data. So if your system falls down and goes boom, you have at least 2 copies of the data somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
But yes.
The only reason why I could think of that you would want to use a Stripe is if you had multiple computers that were running that Stripe and you were bouncing across boxes so that you could get maximum performance. That's about it. That's the only.
If you're insane, some insane situation where you're backing up for maximum performance and then doing a second replication for long term, let it go. Do what the nice operating system tells you, which in this case is ZFS 2, and I think it is getting it's writing its volumes.
Yeah. So what it's doing right now is it's preparing all the drives. It's saying, okay, I'm going to be using you as the spare. I'm going to be using you as the main data drive. I'm writing my parity across them all. This is actually where memory would really come in handy, and a fast processor would come in handy. If I were to run this on like an old single core, that process could take like an hour. Yeah, that's not great. But we're done, so we're ready to go. Now tell me, so I've got myself a volume. Where do I go from here?
I would probably go up to the gears at the top that's labeled services. And we should be able to enable CIFS in there, which is what we would use to, click that on. And that's going to allow OS X and Windows to see this box, to access the data on this box, to use it as a server.
Right.
There's a ton of options inside of here, dynamic DNS and FTP if you want remote access for it. iSCSI, I don't think I'm ever going to touch. NMS, resync. This is like, if you want to get an education in acronyms, install a FreeNAS box and start taking a close look at all of the optional services in there. But generally speaking, once I have CIFS on, I'm pretty good. And then I'm going to go back to the, I want to say, go to CIFS, click on the wrench, make sure all the settings are correct, and then we can go in. And there it is. I should point out that I'm talking and Padre's clicking, so if it sounds disjointed, it's because
there's two brains going on here. Yeah.
So good. Do we want to change the work group? Do we need anything additional?
Yeah, I think we're okay with
Description,
that.
FreeNAS server, UVA, log level, guest account. We're not currently assigning a. No, you do have a static IP address assigned to this.
Correct. Right.
Cool. So as long as I'm on the same network, I should be able to see this with any of my machines?
Absolutely. As long as they know the IP address of 192.168.1.115, they should all be able to get over here, no matter what operating system they're using.
But first they have to get on your network.
But first they have to get my network, and first we also have to set up a share.
Yes.
Because what we've done is we've enabled the sharing service, but we haven't actually told the box yet who's going to access what and what volumes can they access. So I'm going to call this one DIY, just because, you know.
That's easy.
Yeah, that's easy. One of the things I want to do is I also want to allow for guest access. You may not always want this.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to have a share. You may have a hidden share that you only want to be able to access yourself. If that's the case, then please don't allow guest access, because if you allow guest access, you're saying anyone on my network can get into this box.
I don't care who sees this.
I really don't care. And so I click that. And now, technically, since I've already, sorry about that. I wanted to go to the volume that we created, which is know-how. And once this is created, oh gosh, you know, I really wish I had a mouse. I should theoretically have access to that share, yes?
Yes, and you should be able to upload data to that share and download data from that share. This is always the moment of truth. When I log in, will it happen? Do I see it? Does it show up?
Bam. And there we go. So what we've done is we've just created this. This is a 3.72 terabyte share on my FreeNAS box that I could load up with anything I want.
Quick, upload something to it. Upload something to it.
Well, you know what? I don't actually think I have it. Oh, you know what? Everyone needs the Firefox setup. So there we go. I think it's the only thing that on my computer that is. Uh-oh. Wait. See, and I knew we shouldn't have done. Oh, I didn't grant myself access. I'm a bad person.
No, you're not a bad person.
Yeah. No.
This is why, I mean, it's funny. There's really, really good detailed explanations up on the FreeNAS site that'll walk you through the configuration. Padre and I have both done this before, and we just made a basic error that denied us access to the server we just built. Yes!
Yeah. Now, we don't have much time left, but I would like to say one of the things that I've really enjoyed about FreeNAS is that you can have it up and running in literally 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. But there are so many features in here. I'd like to talk a little bit about the plugins. What are some of the plugins that you run in on your FreeNAS box?
Anything that allows me to share musical files and access to my home. I don't know if you can pull in the plugins thing on there, but it should automatically have things like, oh my goodness, there's a brain inside of my head that should be thinking about the basic fundamental tool used to share media inside of my home. That's on every single server I go. Thank you, DLNA.
Yeah.
That's a really sad. The Crash Plan plugin is really cool because it'll actually let us sync stuff off of your FreeNAS up to your Crash Plan
account. You could run a torrent
Couch
plugin.
Potato if you're not into, you know, the...
Getting up.
That's actually really funny. I was going to say XBMC, but there should be, if you scroll down a little bit, I think there might be a Plex plugin now, an XBMC plugin. There's just an incredible, there's the Plex Media server available on there. Transmission is a BitTorrent client. There's a bunch of really, really, really cool things you can do to set up on your FreeNAS box that'll run in the background. Bringing this also back, the less powerful your system is, the fewer plugins you want running, because
And actually, remember, if you start loading up your system with plugins and you notice that your read and write performance starts to decrease, that's why. Because you've loaded down the CPU, and the CPU has less time to handle all the writes across its drives. Now, one quick thing before we go, Patrick, and that is a lot of people are going to be tempted to say, oh, wow, this is awesome. I've got all these parts down in the basement. And they're going to grab any drive they possibly can and drop it into the box. I would say no. What do you say?
If you're doing it as an experiment, feel free to load any junk drive you have inside of it. If you want to spend money, start looking at greens and reds. If you want to be serious about a NAS configuration, go straight to the Western Digital red drives.
Right.
That's just, you know, we could explain why, but we're actually out of time, judging from the waving of fingers I'm seeing from over on the desk. But basically, I run a lot of greens when I'm buying it, because I bought all my greens before I have reds.
I know.
And then drives got
the
expensive, and I stopped drying them. And as I'm replacing them, I'm starting to buy WD reds.
I have 32 greens.
32.
And now I'm thinking about replacing them with reds.
Take your time.
I know exactly. They're not bad drives. It's just reds are better because they run cooler, they use up less power, they'll survive longer inside of a NAS array environment.
And there's all sorts of other things.
Now, I understand that you've got a little something for us. You wanted to show us a device for time-lapsing.
Right. Well, a few episodes ago, I think it was episode 76, I showed the folks how to make a time-lapse just using your GoPro, and but I wanted to, expand on that. And so, but in a cost-effective method. Because the GoPro itself is actually pretty expensive, but it has a lot of features, and I love playing with them anyway. You might have noticed there's something set up behind you.
Yeah,
right
I hear something ticking. I'm like, does he hate me? Is he gonna blow up?
No, it should be fine.
Oh, okay. I've seen these before. Now, this is a different kind of time-lapse. So the time-lapse that we've seen before have been a static camera that looks out over a scene and records a lot of time in a very small amount of video.
Right.
Now, that's cool, but this kind of time-lapse camera actually moves the camera.
Yeah, it puts a little bit of motion into the video, and that makes the time-lapse a little bit more exciting, you know? And so I made a quick video to show you how to do that, but before we get to that, can you do the overhead, Al? So at Know How, we break things so you don't have to. When I first got the timer, I did not realize you could take the screws out from the bottom.
So are those parts supposed to be like that?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
It's like,
and I lost some in between.
You know, I think the problem is that these are curvy. You need to straighten these.
One thing I realized is I'm never going to be a clock maker, because as soon as I pulled this off, I just gave up.
And this is because you didn't call Padre, because Padre could have told you don't take off the top, right?
I don't need Padre for everything.
Okay. All right.
Fortunately, though, Tony's fiance, I believe, went down to IKEA the very next day and bought me 2 more of these. And if you go into the store, they're only $6.
Right.
Pretty basic egg timer. And fortunately, if you don't know how to use an egg timer, IKEA supplies instructions in every language. So if you're kind of confused on how to use it, don't worry. If you don't speak English, don't worry. It's tons of instructions.
Yeah. Let's take a look.
Yeah, let's watch the video.
To begin this project, you're going to need a timer from IKEA. This little guy, the ordning timer from IKEA runs about $6 in the store. If you order it on Amazon, it's $12. So go in store if you can. The next part you'll be needing is a 3/8 inch to 1/4 inch grommet. Now here at Know How, we dedicate ourselves to breaking things so you don't have to. I took apart this first timer and, well, it didn't turn out so good. I'm not going to be able to put that back together for sure. But anyway, we'll use it as a test bench for our unruined timer. So the first thing is I'm going to use this iFixit kit to pull off some of this adhesive foam on the bottom, and it'll reveal 3 screws, which you can easily remove and then pull off the bottom plate. That'll leave the plastic bottom exposed and only 1 screw left to take out to completely take off from the rest of the timer. Now this way I can drill through the timer without damaging any parts. I'm going to do some quick measurements and use a marker to make sure that I have this hole centered. Next, I went down to the TWiT basement and used the drill press with a 5/16 drill to make my hole. It was just a little bit smaller than what I need for the grommet, so I also used a different bit to kind of widen the hole a little bit, and then I was able to slip the grommet in just fine. Use a flathead screwdriver to get it in the rest of the way. It was a little off center when I had it screwed in, so I just tapped it a few times with a hammer to make sure it sat flush against the bottom of the plate. Next, I put the screws back in to hold the bottom plate to the timer, and voila, we have a little grommet that we can now use to mount to a plate for a tripod. Now, to attach the GoPro, you're just going to use a little sticky mount that a lot of GoPros come with as accessories. So having the tripod up high in the studio during TNT, I was able to get this 13-second clip by using 2-second picture mode on the GoPro. And as with any time-lapse, watch out for photo bombers, especially Jason Howell. He has a tendency to want to be in front of the camera a lot.
Now, what I love about that is this is cheap. This is a crazy cheap project.
Yeah, $6 from IKEA, 12 on Amazon, and super easy to set up, and it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, and those little grommets we actually found on Amazon for like 10 for $1. So yeah, get yourself a couple. And it's actually surprisingly good quality. It gives you a really nice pan across whatever scene.
Yeah, and when we first were going to do this project, we thought, well, why stop at a GoPro? Why not do a DSLR or something?
We tried.
It's a little too much for that
Yeah.
poor little guy. But a GoPro is just the right amount of weight, and set it to 2 seconds, and you get like that smooth, just 360 pan. Set it for an hour.
We actually tried very early on. We tried putting just a standard, like one of those JVC camcorders, the prosumer recorders on it. And it was really sad because you heard tick, 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 tick. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's a little too heavy. Now, the other idea we had was putting a grommet on the bottom and on the top so that you could, say, mount it underneath like an eave.
Yeah.
And if it was upside down, this might be able to support the weight, but...
Right. And, as I took apart this timer, there's not a lot of space on the top to drill down.
Yeah.
So, and if you're
really
going to
careful.
drill through it, you're going to have to take it off. And when you do that,
Boing!
yeah.
Yeah. On a future episode of Know How, maybe we could show them how to reassemble this.
Yeah, everybody's clamoring to know how to put back their timers after that episode.
I'm Father Robert Balliser, the digital Jesuit, Padre SJ in the twitkh chat room, and I'm here at Interop, the NOC, the Network Operations Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, Interop is a networking conference, which means it's filled with all the typical tchotchkes you get at conferences. Everything from light-up axes to little balls to this freaking cool fedora. But my real reason for being at the conference is that I make videos. It's how I get content for some of my other Twitch shows. It's my primary reason for coming to these brouhahas. And one of the things that I experience is Adobe Bloat. Now, what is Adobe Bloat, you may be asking yourself? Well, if you use Adobe Premiere, specifically if you use Adobe Premiere in Windows, you may find that over time, especially if your projects are big, if you use a lot of assets and really large assets, your hard drive seems to disappear. Even if you delete those projects, even if you move them off the drive, even if you move them off the computer, you don't always seem to get back as much space as you had when you started a particular project. Well, that, my friends, is Adobe Bloat. What's happening is that every time you bring an asset into a project, Adobe makes a cache file, a copy of that file that it can recall very quickly. The reason why it does this is it wants to make it more quick, more fast, more other English words that don't actually exist in that grammatical use, ways to load your project with a minimum amount of delay. Now, that is cool. It actually works quite well, but the problem is that Adobe Bloat adds up, and eventually you run out of space. But let me show you an easy way to get rid of it. The first thing we want to do is enable the viewing of hidden folders. Go to Start, Control Panel, Folder Options, select the View tab, Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives, and you're good. The reason why we need to do this is because the common folders, which hold those cache files, are in a hidden folder, which means that if you don't enable these options, you won't be able to see it, you won't be able to navigate to it. Now you need to navigate to your Adobe Common Media folder. Go to My Computer, select C, go to the Users folder, go to the folder with your username, select App Data, select Roaming, select Adobe, select Common, select Media Cache Files. Now, you'll also run into Adobe Bloat if you're a Mac user, but just look for the same folder. Look for those cache file folders, and you'll be able to clear your bloat just as easily as you can in Windows. What I typically like to do is make a shortcut to that common folder and leave it on my desktop. It's an easy way to get there and a reminder that every once in a while I should clear my cache. Now, let me make one little caveat, and that is if you intend to load the same files over and over again, don't clear those out of the cache folder because Adobe's just going to have to remake those files. But if you move from project to project and if you really want that space back, you can find that you get 60, 70, 80, 100, 200 gigabytes of space back on your hard drive, and that's a great way to stop Adobe Bloat. I'm Father Robert Balliser, and now you know.
Now, Adobe Bloat is actually a serious problem. You were asking me this during the break. Is it, do I really have to check my machine? That 36 gigabyte was accumulated on my machine over the course of 4 days.
That's not a long time.
It's not a long time. And the other problem is that, well, depending on how much you work with Adobe, that's going to determine how fast those cache files build up, which is an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would suggest is that anytime you are using Adobe Premiere, just have that folder on your desktop so that you know that you can jump into that at any time and just empty those out. Because honestly, the worst thing that's going to happen is Adobe has to rebuild the cache files and you continue on from there.
Right. Well, I was planning on doing a little bit of editing on my my MacBook Air, which isn't like, you know, a great editing machine or anything, but I took some shots on vacation last week and stuff, and I just want to do something simple, but it's a 128 gigabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
So I got to make sure I delete whatever I can on that.
Yeah.
So.
I think people became much more sensitive to this when SSDs started becoming the norm.
Yeah.
Because if you had a huge 3 terabyte hard drive on your computer and that's what you were using as your primary OS drive and your primary edit drive, then you didn't care if it used up another 100, 200 gigabytes. You probably didn't even really notice.
Right.
You just thought it was a regular part of the bloat. But if you've got that SSD, especially like a 128 gigabyte SSD, you'll quickly say, wait, why do I only have 1 gig free? Where did that all go? And it's in Premiere.
Good to know.
All right. I promised my fans on Twitter that I would show you a quick, down and dirty, easy way to get back up to 10% of your system performance if you're using Windows 7 or Windows 8.
Nice.
Shall we take a look?
Yeah, let's do that.
What about that? Now, we all like speed. We long for it. We crave it. We want it in our PCs, in our laptops, our Macs, our devices. Pretty much anything that can go faster, we want it to go faster. And so we spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of time building and breaking and upgrading and replacing, all in the quest for speed. But what if I told you Windows 7 and 8 users that there was a way for you to get up to 10% of your speed back without upgrading anything? Without replacing anything, without really changing the way you use Windows or even opening up the case. Now, I know it sounds like a pipe dream, I know it sounds too good to be true, but folks, this is something that I've been doing since Windows 7 dropped on the world. Now, the tip centers around 2 services that are always running in the background of Windows 7 and Windows 8. The first is called Remote Assistance. Now, technically, the feature is very, very cool. It sits in the background and it waits for someone to connect to your computer and use their keyboard and mouse to show you how to fix something that's going wrong with your computer. Again, nice feature, but I'd be willing to bet that very few of us have ever actually used it. So if we're not using it, why let it sit in the background using up your resources? The second service is called System Restore. Now, this actually is a very useful service. It allows you to create save points that you can jump back to, so if you bork your system, you always have an easy way to go back to an image that was clean. Here's the problem, though. Very few of us have safe System Restore points. Very few of us have actually done the work to make sure that we've got the save points where we want them. And so we're normally going to go back to the original factory image. Well, if we're going to do that, we've got the factory installed disk, we've got the factory installed partition. We normally have some sort of way to go back to how it was when we first received the computer. If that's what we're going to do, and especially I'd suggest you do that if you get a virus, then why even have that running? Well, let me show you how to turn them off. The first thing you need to do is get to the System option in Control Panel. I usually just right-click the computer icon in the desktop and choose Properties. Once in the System menu, you'll see all the stats on your computer, but to the left of the stats, you'll see Control Panel Home, along with 4 shielded options. Click Remote Settings. You'll see a field for Allow Remote Assistance Connections to this computer. Go ahead and uncheck that box, then click Apply. You've just turned off the Remote Assistance service, but now we need to shut off System Protection. In the Control Panel, there is a tab for System Protection. Go ahead and select that. You'll notice under Protection Settings that it will tell you if one of your drives is protected. Usually it protects the drive with the operating system, but not the others. Select the drive that is protected, then click Configure. Now select the radio button to turn off System Protection and apply the change. That's it. You've just turned off the 2 background services and recovered all the horsepower that had been going to feed those 2 services. Now, I'm sure there's some of you who are skeptical that you can actually get up to 10% of your horsepower back, so I ran PC Mark Vantage before and after the changes. With the services on, this PC scored 13,394. After I ran the benchmark again, making just these 2 changes, the PC scored 14,578. If you do the math, that's a 9% increase, all without buying, upgrading, or installing anything. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the Digital Jesuit, and now that you know how to take your horsepower back, go do it. Now, Brian, you can overdo this. In fact, I know a lot of people who do overdo this. They like turn off all the services that they possibly can.
Right, I've been a victim of that.
Yeah,
I've
which
done that.
it's just good. You know, it's good to turn off things that you don't need, but yeah, you can go too far and suddenly there's not a service there that you need to, for that off thing that every once in a while
And then
happens.
you reboot and you wonder what the heck has happened to my system.
Right, and so that's why I chose these two services. These two services are actually really cool features, but I'd be willing to gather that 99% of us have never used a remote assistance, and at least 75% of us have never used System Restore. So if that's the case, if you're not going to use those things, you might as well, take them out.
Very rarely. I was even actually this weekend, I was thinking about formatting my computer, and System Restore, I never used it, and most of the stuff I back up to external hard drives. It's like,
Yeah, and for me, the only thing that really makes me think about reinstalling or going back to a previous version is if I think some way my system has been compromised or I installed something and it's messing it up. And in those instances, I never want to use System Restore because it doesn't quite clean everything.
and it doesn't always
fix it.
Yeah, it doesn't get rid of everything.
Right,
yeah.
so I just go back to the factory fresh install. Yeah, it's also, I kind of like that. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm a Windows user.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, every 18 months or so, I like to reset everything because, not necessarily because the Windows is messed up, but because of all the junk I've added on.
Right,
And I just want a clean house.
It's nice to just start fresh, and then the way I do it is I just add things as I need them. Like, I'm not going to use Premiere this week. I'll, install it next week when I'm going to be editing something. So.
Right. All right, so we're doing a little something. Remember we talked a while ago about Novak, right?
Yes, very expensive.
Very crazy expensive, but very cool for cooling things. Cool for, yeah. It was good at thermal conduction.
Good one.
So what you would do is you would use it in like sealed server racks with a lot of blades to pull the heat away from the components so you could do away with air cooling.
Right, it's completely submerged hardware. And so that's why we bought like 5 gallons of it, right?
We
got access to Leo's credit card.
$4,000 fluid, $4,000 again. No,
While Leo was on vacation. Yeah.
We sold his car. No, there have been ways for people to cool with liquid in the past. In fact, this is from Alex's setup.
Yes.
This is some of this Coolant's computer liquid coolant. The idea, it's just water, but it has a few additives in here so that it doesn't mold up and so it doesn't gum up.
Full.
I think the key ingredient was glycol.
Yeah, so it's basically, it's
like
antifreeze.
antifreeze. Yeah.
Yeah, it's antifreeze.
No wonder it was so sweet.
But then you'd also need things like this. Here, you hold on to this, because this thing is, that's impressive.
Okay.
That's the radiator assembly. That's how you would get heat out of the system, right?
Right.
So as you're pumping liquid through your devices, and this is how you would get the heat off. This will fit onto the CPU. It's a water block.
And it would pump the fluid through
The fluid through, right, and then it would eventually run through here. So you needed a water block on all the major heat sources. So the hard drives, the CPU, the video card, maybe the graphics, maybe the chipset that's on the motherboard. It's a cool system. In fact, Alex, do you have any pictures? Yeah,
Literally a cool system.
I love playing with this stuff when I was still modding. It's fun to play with. It's fun to tinker with, but you experience this. It's a pain in the butt, right?
It is a mess to maintain, and unless you're doing some overclocking, it's not that much better than just using air.
Yeah. Well, and the other problem is you need to have a cooling block on anything you want to cool.
Right.
Because that's how the heat gets removed. And since you don't typically have a cooling block on everything, there's still heat being generated, you still need to have a fan in the case, which kind of defeats the purpose of having liquid cooling in the first place.
So if you wanted to go all out with liquid cooling, you would just submerge the whole thing.
Submerge, right. Which is why we were talking about Novak. Novak could allow us. We could, if you go to the overhead shot, this is a computer that I built over the weekend. If you go to the wide shot, you'll see it's running Ubuntu. It's just playing a little video. It's got barely enough power to do that. This is really scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Yeah.
But we could put Novak right into this tub and then put some sort of actually, probably the surface area would be radiative enough where we would have to have nothing else. No cooling fans, no nothing.
Very cool.
Now, what allows that to happen is the fact that that liquid is what we call dielectric.
Right.
Which means it does not conduct.
Right.
It won't then
Because
charge
otherwise,
us-
if you tried water, that would just short everything
It would be
out.
the shortest experiment. Actually, if you want to see what happens when you try to cool directly with water, look for Leo Laporte Liquipel iPhone, because that's basically what happened. Now, when we do this with a dielectric fluid, like Novec, which is specifically designed to do cooling, the heat gets pulled away from the components. And because Novec has such a low thermal retention rate, it wants to give that heat back. It wants to give it out. So it will conduct it straight off the components into whatever radiator you're using to cool your system.
Right. Transfer the heat away from the source.
Right. Before Novec, there was a fluid also by 3M called Fluorinert.
Oh,
which
yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
it was used, yeah. Actually, Fluorinert, Alex, do you have that clip from The Abyss with the breathing? They used it as a plot point in The Abyss. Fluorinert, you can actually also super oxygenate. You can attach a bunch of oxygen molecules to it, and you can saturate the fluid.
And then
and
breathe
you can
it?
breathe it.
I've seen that. It
In The
looks
Abyss,
freaky.
they used it as a plot point. The idea was you could breathe it so that your lungs don't compress, so you could do
Right,
some
so
deep
you could
diving.
go deep diving.
This
Yeah,
was
that-
real. They actually did that. That's not CG. They really did put rats in heavily oxygenated Fluorinert.
But don't worry, he's okay.
He's okay. Now, when Ed Harris did it, was a special effect because
Because Ed Harris would never go through
humans probably.
that.
Well,
That
they
would
had
be a frightening experience.
they did testing with it, and what they found out was it would work, but the problem is once you get the Fluorinert out of your
How do
lungs,
you get it out?
you still have what's called the dry drowning. Your lungs would actually
Start-
pump fluid into your lungs, and then you would.
Oh, okay. Well, thank goodness that this machine doesn't have lungs,
Yeah,
so
okay.
we can we can do it to that.
Now we could do it with Fluorinert, which is not as good as Novec, but it's still pretty good at pulling heat away. The problem is, if you buy that, it's about $1,500 to $2,000 a gallon. You could get it for about $300 a gallon if you don't mind it being used.
Which it could have like.
I would not do that.
Well, you were saying too that you want to make sure before you even attempt this is to clean the
Yeah.
hardware as best you can, because
Right.
if there's any metal particles that could float from the surface
Right.
and then make a connection, you could short that way.
If you go back to the overhead, you probably can't notice from this far away, but I've gone over this computer thoroughly with a soldering brush just to make sure there are no particles hanging out. And also know that if you submerge your computer in liquid, a lot of these things, like these stickers that use solvents,
Start to break down.
it's
and
going to
peel
break
off.
down and peel off, right? So yeah, just be aware of a few things you're going to do. Now, we know that theoretically, dielectric fluids shouldn't conduct electricity, but will conduct heat. We know that,
Yes,
theoretically.
yes. Yeah, theoretically.
Mineral oil
Oh.
is a dielectric fluid.
And it's a lot cheaper.
It's a lot cheaper versus $2,000 a gallon. This is $25 a gallon.
But the
or
trade-off
less.
is that will retain.
It retains heat a little more, so it doesn't readily give it off. Which means if you want to use this for some extreme cooling, you're going to have a really
You're
good
gonna have to
radiator.
have fans and radiator. Okay.
Now, we haven't actually tested this yet.
We've only been drinking.
It's a mild laxative, which explains why we're not so full of it.
It says for animal use only. So should I not have been putting that in Jeff's coffee?
lubricates the intestinal tract. So theoretically, we should be able to pour this entire container of mineral oil on top of that computer, submerge it,
Theoretically.
and it should continue to show us Ghost in the Shell.
That's know-how for you. Let's
All
see
right.
if it works.
Okay, so theoretically, this is going to work.
Are you gonna do the whole thing?
Yeah, why not?
All right.
Okay, here we go.
All right,
I don't want to hit the fan because it's going to...
That's gonna
Yeah, so...
easy, Padre. This is so
Okay,
against.
and go to the wide shot. Are we still showing some
Oh.
anime?
Oh no, we got some steam coming out, Padre.
No.
No, folks, that is a visual effect. We are okay.
No. Okay, here we go.
Oh, the
Oh,
fan's
the
going
fan.
in.
Here's the fan. The fan's going. The fan.
Even the USB is submerged.
There we go.
Wow.
That is a gallon of mineral oil. Oh, and now this is what I like. Look at the fan. The fan
still
is
going.
still going. It's actually, so even though the fan is under the mineral oil, it's still, and this is cool, it can agitate the oil because you still need to agitate it to get the heat spread around equally.
Right. That is cool.
Yeah, so theoretically it works, and guess what? In actuality it works. Now,
Right.
no, we're not going to put a rat in here.
No.
Alex.
We love rats too
Alex,
much.
we
for
like
that.
rats. Okay, now there's a few things that we should say about this. We are actually going to build ourselves an Aquarium PC. We're going to do it with
Yes.
a much higher spec motherboard than this.
Right,
This is
right,
like
right,
an
right.
Atom processor.
Right.
It's barely got enough power to run. Ubuntu.
Yeah.
But we're gonna squeeze a lot of power into this thing. We're gonna see how fast of a processor we can get away with without putting any serious cooling. We want it to just radiate through the sides of the tank. The other thing to remember about this is it's cool.
Yeah.
But mineral oil is very fine and it stays on everything. So basically,
once you do this,
it's not,
you're not gonna undo this.
Yeah. The other thing is we will eventually put this power supply in.
It's okay to do the power supply too?
Oh yeah, no. Dielectric is dielectric. It's going to work for AC or DC.
Okay.
The only reason why we didn't put the power supply in here is
because this isn't the finished.
It's not the finished thing, and
this is our test bed.
Yeah. This is our nice power supply, and we didn't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
With mineral oil.
It's still going.
That works just fine.
Nice.
So folks, what you want to do is go home and find your parents' computer,
dunk it in oil.
Dunk it in mineral oil, and tell them Padre SJ said to do it.
Don't try this at home.
Okay. No. I think that's about it for this episode of Stop, Alex. You're going to show us a little something about Yosemite.
Yes. So I kind of put this off a little while because Yosemite, it's been out for a few weeks now. But like any new software, you don't want to be necessarily an early adopter. There was a beta kind of played with and stuff, but finally I felt like, okay, Yosemite is solid. It's not a bad. At first I was a little hesitant with the new color scheme because it felt like I was using iOS and not like a real computer, but it's grown on me, and finally I decided to show people how to make a bootable USB because it's super easy and it's really helpful for people who have to set up a lot of Macs.
Right.
Or you don't have online access to certain ones, or maybe you have like a bandwidth cap, so you don't want to just keep downloading Yosemite because it's 5.5 gigs.
I've taken this from my Windows side, but I always like to have the installation files just because I don't want to have to do a multiple terabyte download just because I want to do a fresh installation of my OS.
Yeah, so once you've made this, you'll have the USB around and you can plug it in and just restart your computer and boot it up. But here's a quick little video that I made of that.
The first step to making your own bootable USB drive is you'll need a USB drive. It'll have to be 8 gigabytes or more, so think about that. And you'll need a Mac. That's all. Plug your USB into your main Mac device and head on over to the Apple App Store. Search for OS X Yosemite and download. This could take a little while. It's about 5.5 gigs, so sit back, relax, and wait. Once Yosemite's finished downloading, you can open up Terminal, and if you're feeling a little bit crazy, you can try and type in the code yourself, but I recommend taking the code that I have listed in the show notes and just copying it and pasting it into your terminal and hit enter. You'll have to put in your password because you are using the sudo command, and this will pull the OS X Yosemite download and make your USB drive bootable. It's really as simple as that. And once you've completed that, it does take a while, so keep that in mind. If you think it might be frozen, wait. It could take up to 30 minutes depending on how fast your USB drive is. And once it's done, you can plug it into the Mac that you want to update to Yosemite, reboot, and launch from the USB drive.
I really like the background music. There was a piccolo in there somewhere.
No, it's a demonstration video, so you gotta keep people interested.
It makes sense. I mean, if you're going to download the files anyway, why not make it into a boot drive? Even if you never use it, keep that thing in a drawer somewhere, and the next version of OS X, do the same thing. Make a boot drive for that, so you'll be ready to go when you want to update your laptop, your desktop, whatever it might be.
And there is a program you can download. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it has an interface. But it's like, if I'm gonna have the code that you need to just copy in the show notes, so just use that and paste it into Terminal, and it's easier just to do it that way. So.
Right. Well, how about this? Would you like the ability to fast prototype stuff, but without the 3D printer?
Yes.
How about just like using your hands, like lumps of clay?
I am used to doing that.
Okay, well then we got something for you. This stuff is called Instamorph. Now this is, 34 ounces of it. You can buy this on Amazon for about 40 bucks. This has become very, very popular in the cosplay and the modeling community. Because the idea is these little plastic pellets, if you go to the overhead, these little plastic pellets actually
look delicious.
It's hard to see. There you go. They look like little rice grains, right?
Yeah.
Well, they soften up when you expose them to hot water, temperatures of 150 or more. I like 160 degrees. And then you can mold them. It becomes like clay. It's malleable.
Whoa.
Yeah, so in fact, let's show you a little bit of a little something. So here's a demonstration. So here's some hopefully hot enough water.
We might have to get some more hot water.
Yeah. We're gonna go ahead and take some, this is just a little bit of Instamorph. So when you pour it into this water, what's gonna happen is you're gonna start to see it turn transparent. So it's gonna go from white to this clear color, and when it becomes the clear color, it means that it's ready for you to mold. Now the cool thing about this is you can use it like clay.
That's cool.
Yeah, so once it becomes malleable, you can cut it, you can squish it, you can stretch it, and you can form it into any shape that you need in order to make the form that you're trying to make.
Wow.
Now, this is so much faster than 3D printing because it's no longer I have to make the design and then print it and then reprint it when the design's not right. This is all you just like when you were in kindergarten.
Yeah, as long as you're good at making Play-Doh and clay things, you should be all right.
I've got one we started a while back. It might have actually cooled off, but I want to see. Let's do this. And then we got to drain the excess water. Okay, so now this is a little here. Go, you take this.
Okay.
Go and start molding that.
Oh, whoa. That's crazy.
Here.
Ew.
Right. So what? Yeah, it'll start becoming like a putty. This is a little too cold, so we didn't get quite up to the operating temperature. But but again, the nice thing about this is you can cut it, you can slice it, you can squish it, and I have seen some absolutely gorgeous designs made with Instamorph. Some people use it for masking. So what you do is you make a mask of someone's face, and then you can mold what you want on the outside. So it's great for cosplay because you can get. Yeah, there you go.
This really does feel. It's like clay. It feels kind of like clay, but just it doesn't break apart as
exactly,
easily.
and that's not even at the right temperature. So that's still a little bit too cold. But when it cools down. Oh, actually, Burke's bringing us.
Oh, we got more hot water coming in.
Wait,
I think Alex knows what I'm making right now. We used to do this a lot in elementary school.
And high school.
And after.
Ooh, okay, yeah, that did it. That did the trick.
Oh.
See, now look,
whoa,
that stuff,
yeah.
see how that's all transparent now?
It went super clear, yeah.
It went very, very clear. And now with this material...
Help me! Help me! Sorry.
here's the best part. If I had put dye into this water, it would take the color of the dye. So you can dye colors into this thing if you want to do colored designs.
Yeah.
And you can cool it off. So if we had like a tub of water, you could flash cool it so that you say, okay, that part's fine, stay there.
Oh, that's cool.
Or you could use a heat gun if you need to like just get a bit more and just heat it up enough.
Can I dip it back in here? And
you can recycle it. So if your design doesn't work out, just go ahead and put it back in. Give it a bit more heat.
Tell me your secrets. Never.
So will the clay guy melt?
Are you making the Wicker Man?
No, I'm just making a little guy.
Actually, no. Thank you, Burke. This is actually.
Thanks, Burke.
I can do this now.
What are you gonna make?
Cross.
Boring.
Duh. That's what I do. It's my deal. It's my jam, Brian.
That is cool.
Ooh, mine's good. Ow! Okay, mine's hot. Mine's really hot.
Be careful. Be careful.
Here, you show them your design.
Okay. So I've got. That was pretty easy to make actually for me. Like if you have any experience messing with clay, like I have done a lot. It's pretty much like that. Except it's so cool how it sticks together so well, and it does feel like like plastic. Like it's just got that smooth texture to it.
If you like it, you should have put a ring on it.
What is
or
that?
Bracelet.
So is yours that much clear? Because
when I was a kid, I made a lot of ashtrays. It started as something and then it ended up ashtray.
Nobody I knew smoked, but I always made ashtray.
Here's the issue though. Instamorph is great, but if you have no creative skills, it's still gonna look like this versus like that.
All right, I'm gonna start making some stuff with this project. So is yours this much clear because
it's still hot?
It's still hot.
So as it gets colder, it's gonna get more and more opaque, and then eventually it will become stiff. So this is still pretty easy to move.
Right.
But if I were to put it, let's put it in my drinking water.
Gross.
Yeah, we'll just leave him in there for a while. So he's gonna cool off, and it actually becomes hard plastic.
Cool.
People have made chassis for quadcopters, along with face masks. Essentially anything that you want to make that holds a shape or holds an edge, Instamorph is perfect for. And it's cheap because the idea behind this is once you're done with your design, if you don't like it, so
just melt
that's now
it again.
become pretty firm.
Yeah.
You just put it back in the hot water and it'll turn back into this opaque stuff.
I guess that's just one thing you have to be careful of, though. Like if you make a
you can't get it too
quadcopter
hot.
frame out of it and it gets too hot and motors fly off or something.
So it turns back into modeling putty at about 150 degrees. It starts to soften at about 100 degrees.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful.
That is so
But yeah,
cool.
you got a lot of time to model. I mean, see, this thing is, we can still go. We can still stretch this out if we let's make stuff.
Padre, your creativity is showing.
I'm really not good at this. It's I know what I can make. You know what you can make? You can
What?
make orthodontal
Bite down
appliances.
on it?
Yeah.
That
Oh,
sounds
you can
kinda
make bite
gross.
plates with this stuff.
Yeah, you could. I'm not going to do that because I've seen you touching it. But
Yeah. Actually, Patrick Delahanty could make Groot. He could make baby Groot's face with this stuff.
oh yeah. Well, I bet if you had like a mold too, and you could just kind of like press it into a mold and then bloop, pull it out.
User 2422 says, well, how many times is it going to be used? It's endless.
Endless.
It's plastic.
It doesn't
so
lose like its
it doesn't lose its
or anything?
elasticity. The worst thing that could happen is it starts to get dirty. So if you happen to heat it up when it's covered in filth, that stuff it's like clay. It's
Sticks to
stuck
it.
in there, right? But you can always add new virgin material to increase the strength of it if it is a little sticky, a little tacky. But I've used the same bits of Instamorph over and over for probably 2 or 3 months. I have a little holder on my computer for my camera because I want to keep it at a certain level.
And you made it
It's
out of
perfect,
this?
yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yeah, if you want to do some fast prototyping or 3D printers like setup, this is a very, very good alternative because it's cheap, it's super easy to work with, and it's pretty much good for all occasions.
That is neat. Yeah, especially if you don't have like a drafting background or you're not used to extruding models and making like a 3D thing. But you have worked with clay and you just want to make something simple.
Yeah.
Like,
If you like to work with your hands, if you're a visual person, this is actually a better medium because unlike a 3D printer where you have to have everything finalized before you start printing, you could change the design as you go. In fact, what I've seen some more advanced 3D printer guys do is they'll use something like Instamorph to make the first design, and then they'll either 3D scan it or they'll draw their CAD from that design so that they can get the final version on a 3D printer.
That is cool. And it's getting harder.
It's getting hard, It will get harder and harder until it becomes like hard plastic.
It's plastic
it will
again.
become the same consistency as these beads. So, I mean, if you feel this it's gonna end up this strength right there. So it's got a nice density to it.
Plastic.
It's hard plastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Brian, can we see your guy?
My little guy? Yeah.
So this is something that you did a lot.
Well, let's take a look here.
I was wondering if you'd find those pictures. Yep, that was that's actually in my drafting class right there. Back in high school. So yep, I have lots of practice at making these little guys.
And as Beef said, the longer that you play with it, the harder it gets. Thank you.
That's terrible.
Now, folks, we've got a special occasion because
Episode 1, 2, 3.
Oh, slow on the draw. Nice.
He's
call
doing
out,
a
by
bunch
the
of
way.
other stuff back
But
there.
because it's episode 123, we do have the much promised first flight video. We're going to show you the last steps to take your 250 class that we've been building up over the last couple of weeks and take it outside and put it in the air. So, Alex, without further ado, because it's episode 123.
Nice try.
In the last edition of Project Quad, we assembled the airframe, wired our electronics, tested the radio, set the proper rotation of our motors, and calibrated the ESCs. Today, we've got one last step before we can take our quad on its maiden flight, configuring the flight controller. Unlike most other controllers, the KK 2.1.5 has its own screen, meaning that you don't have to connect it to a laptop or mobile device to change settings. As you grow more comfortable with flying and dialing in your configuration, you can move to more feature-filled flight controllers like my personal favorite, the Flip MWC. But for the novice, there's nothing like the KK's ability to let you tweak your flight characteristics in the field with no extra gear. Power up your quad, and the KK board should be at its safe screen. The 4 buttons below the screen from left to right are back, up, down, and enter. Hit enter to drop into the menu. The first step is to load the proper motor layout. This tells the controller how many motors it has to use and what their positions are relative to the controller. Use the down key to navigate to Load Motor Layout and hit Enter. You'll see a menu of preloaded configurations that include single and dual rotor helicopters, tricopters, septicopters, octocopters, plus mode quads, and of course, our X mode configuration quadcopter. Navigate to Quadcopter X mode and hit Enter. You'll be asked to confirm your decision and hit Yes. The screen should change to show the motor layout, including the required motor rotation. If you followed our tutorial in the last Project Quad segment, then your quad will match the on-screen layout. But this is an excellent reference screen if you ever need to reassemble your quad. Next, we need to configure the onboard accelerometers. Navigate to ACC Calibration and hit Enter. Make sure that your quad is on a solid, level surface and that it's free from vibration. Hit Continue, then don't touch the quad again until calibration is complete. Now we want to configure the self-level control. Navigate to Mode Settings and hit Enter. The first entry should be labeled Self-Level and it should read AUX or Auxiliary. This means that you can use an auxiliary channel on your transmitter to turn the KK self-leveling feature on and off at will. You can also use stick and activate or deactivate the self-level with a stick command, but I don't recommend it unless you only have 4 channels. If you wired your quad as specified in the last Project Quad segment, then channel 5 should be the on-off switch for self-leveling. If you're using the FlySky T6 transmitter and you want to reassign self-leveling to a more convenient input, then watch our segment on transmitters. The last setting we want to configure is the auto level itself. Navigate to self-level and hit Enter. For most, the default value should work fine on a 250 class quad, but I like to turn down my P gains to between 30 and 60. The P gain will regulate how quickly the controller will try to level the craft, and too high of a P gain can cause oscillation, as the craft constantly overcorrects its level. Before we get into the air, let's do a quick check of our handiwork to make sure that the quad will respond as we think it will. Put your quad on a level surface and turn on your transmitter. Connect the battery to the ESCs and verify that the KK has booted into safe mode. Position yourself so that you are behind and above your quad, with the front of the craft pointing away from you. Now arm the controller by moving the throttle to 0 and pushing the stick to the right. You should hear a beep and see the arming light turn on. Toggle your auxiliary channel number 5 and see if the self-level turns on and off. You'll want self-leveling off for the following test. Take a few step backs, then give your quad about 20% throttle. You want to spin up the props but not take off. If you start to leave the ground, reduce throttle. Look for any uncontrolled vibrations or wobbles. Now move the right stick forward slightly until you see the craft start to tilt forward. Be gentle. You're just checking input. You don't want to flip your quad. Move the stick back and see if it rocks back on the landing gear. Now move to the left and to the right, checking to see if the quad leans in that direction. Lastly, move the left stick right and left to see if the craft will rotate in the right direction. If any of these inputs fail to cause the expected action, then you need to check your transmitter for reversed channels and your wiring for incorrect connections. Run through the last Project Quad segment again and check those connections. When you're done testing inputs, move the throttle to 0% and to the left. This will disarm the controller. Make sure to do this before you ever pick up your quad, otherwise you risk the prop spinning up if you tap the throttle. Once you're satisfied that the quad will respond properly to your inputs while in the air, it's time for your maiden flight. Confirm that your KK is on in the safe screen, then flip your auxiliary channel to turn self-leveling on. Once again, stand a safe distance behind your quad with the front of the craft pointed away from you, arm the craft, and bring the throttle to about 30%. Let it spin up, then continue to advance the throttle until your craft leaves the ground. Your controller should keep the craft level as it lifts off. If it starts to wobble, oscillate, or careen out of control, chop the throttle. You can fix your quad. You may not be able to fix what it runs into. Assuming that there were no problems, let the quad rise until it's about 4 feet off the ground. Modulate your throttle to keep your quad at the same altitude while you use the right stick to hold position. You want to use small, constant inputs. Always be adjusting the flight of your quad without large control inputs. You've probably just encountered the first challenge to flying, the ground effect. The prop wash creates a cushion of turbulence near the ground. The bigger the props, the bigger the cushion. As a result, the air near the ground is choppy and unpredictable. You'll get a much smoother ride once you're above that layer, about 4 feet. Hover. A lot. Use an entire battery or 12 to practice hovering. You can vary your altitude, but always keep it low enough so that chopping the throttle won't cause extensive damage. Note that your quad will be unstable if you try to bring it straight down. That's because it has to fly through the turbulence it's creating. If you want a smoother flight, always descend while moving. It doesn't feel like much, but you're learning the characteristics of your new quad, and your brain is learning how to control your fingers to keep the quad where you want it to be. At first, you should be practicing 3 inputs: elevator, aileron, and throttle. The yaw or rudder should be left alone. Keep the quad's rear pointed towards you, and don't worry about rotating your craft just yet. Mix up the hovering practice with an occasional landing. Landing sounds easy, but the problem is the aforementioned ground effect. As your quad gets closer to landing, it will want to hover just a few inches off the ground, even as you reduce throttle. Pick your landing spot, reduce throttle until you hit the ground effect, correct your angle to keep your landing spot, then quickly reduce throttle to drop through the ground effect. Once you've mastered takeoff, hovering, and landing, it's time to try something a bit more challenging: walking the quad. Find yourself an open stretch of field or a wide abandoned street. Take off and place your quad in front of you about 5 feet away. Now start walking and keep your quad at the same distance from you as you walk. You're training your brain to handle multi-vector spatial reasoning. In other words, your brain is learning how to adjust the flight of your quad while you are moving. Use another dozen or so batteries to walk the quad. Once you're comfortable with basic movement, practice moving your quad from left to right, all the while keeping it within your practice radius. When that becomes easy, practice rotating the quad a complete 360 degrees as quickly as you can while it's stationary, making sure to manage the throttle to keep altitude. Once walking the quad becomes second nature, it's time to move on to the circle of death. Okay, it's not really a circle of death, but it's a good way to add yaw into your practice. You've been using the throttle, elevator, and aileron in your practice thus far, but we haven't actively rotated the craft while moving. The circle changes that. Take off and push your quad about 10 feet from you. Now, without moving from the spot you're standing in, start to slowly turn your body while keeping the quad in front of you, with its rear always facing your body. In order to do this, you're going to have to use all 4 controls. On the right stick, you'll have to move left or right to keep the quad in front of you, and forward and back to keep it a safe distance from your body. On the left stick, you'll need to use the yaw to slowly rotate the craft in order to keep its rear pointed at you, and the throttle to hold altitude as you turn. Start slowly, then pick up the pace as you get accustomed to the control combination. If you start to get overwhelmed, stop your rotation and reset the quad a safe distance before starting again. Once you're comfortable with these exercises, you can move on to more challenging flight.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's too fantastic to believe. Nobody will believe the invasion of the Saucermen.
That looks like a piece of propeller.
Yeah, I have extras. And
Yeah, I
that,
have
folks, is
extras.
why you buy extra props.
Yeah, it looks like you might have broke something
No
there.
props were harmed in the making of that video.
Except for that
Yeah,
last
a
one.
lot of them. Actually.
Very cool.
Now, here's the thing. There are a few things that people disagree on training. And for example, the flight test guys, who we're going to have over on Padres Corner in a bit, they will tell you to never chop power. I kind of train inside of a city, even though I do have a field to myself. And so my thing is, if I'm training and I'm keeping it low, I'm keeping it within 4 or 5 feet, if it starts to get away from me, I will chop power.
Yeah.
Just because there's more things that I can damage with the quad than the quad will be damaged by dropping 4 feet.
Right, and for me, when I was out at my uncle's ranch, I had plenty of space, nothing was gonna get hurt, but the quad was so far away, I couldn't tell which direction it was going, and like beads of sweat were coming down. It's like, don't chop the throttle, don't cut the throttle, it's gonna go straight into a creek.
And so what I would say is that's like
You gotta know
when
the
you're
situation.
starting, that's your thing, that's your go-to move. Right. But as you get more experience and as you start flying over, chopping the power becomes no longer an option.
Right.
Because once you chop power, you lose all control of your quad. You have no attitude control, altitude control. It's all gone. So just remember this: if you start to get into trouble, have a checklist that you can run through really quickly in your head to slow things down. Because what you want is you want to give your brain time to catch up.
Right.
That also means that you never put your quad into a situation where it's doing something too quickly.
Right.
Like, for example, there's one shot in that montage where I'm spinning it around, and I'm watching it really closely so I know when I'm going to get to full rotation, I can stop the yawing. You don't want to just do that randomly, because then you end up with your quad in a position that you don't know, and now your sticks don't respond in the same way.
And then you do something that's more reactionary, and it's like, oh, it's going the wrong direction.
That's the worst part. The worst part is you do something that you think is going to fix it, and it makes it worse, and now your brain's just going, and you just chop.
Yeah, I went back over my GoPro footage, and it felt like, for me, it felt like it was forever. But the GoPro footage, it was like 5 seconds, but it was floating out, and I just was trying to hover it and figure out which direction it was going.
Time slows down.
That would have helped.
The other thing is, and again, the guys over at Flight Test, they're big on this. They tell their beginners to learn with the self-leveling off. That's absolutely a way to do it. And they're right in that once you learn how to fly it without any of the self-level assist, you'll be golden. I kind of go the other way in that confidence is really what's going to help you, and especially confidence on the orientation. So what happens perspective and your control inputs. So I like to fly it with the self-level on, and then I turn it off once I start to feel a bit confident, and you get a feel for what the quad will do by itself.
Right, because even starting with this, like I feel 100% comfortable with this, but it's still a pretty big jump to this. And I would like to get a feel for it before I turn off all the computer aids.
Now, a nice median is, and this is why we suggested the Flip 1.5, the MWC for this. It will do horizon, which essentially will let you go all acrobatic. So it's like flying it on full manual until you release the sticks. If you release the sticks, it'll default back to self-level, which is nice because, like, for example, on the MWC, when I was doing that flip in the montage, as I'm going into the turn, I just flip a switch and it turns off all the self-level assist.
I feel like there should be a little
manual.
sound bite that says like, "Luke, you've turned off your targeting computer."
I wish there was a microphone in my brain because it was like, oh God, this is gonna be bad. This is gonna be bad. Click, turn it back on. That's essentially.
It should be like a big red button.
Yeah, it should be. It's easy.
Yeah, that was not easy.
But the big thing is this, folks. No matter what you're gonna build, and I would suggest, no matter what, start with a trainer. You know, if you learn on one of these.
That's my baby.
Yeah, we still fly these. You know, right now it's raining in California. I fly these things indoors. It's a great way to just get your hands on something that flies like one of the big ones.
It's the only one that I can fly into Burke without him, coming to hurt me back.
You were badass from the set. Creighton Burke. Yeah, but learn on that and then move up to one of these. And above all else, just use your head. Don't be like those DJI fools that you see on YouTube who are flying over a beach of people who have no idea it's up there, or who are flying into the side of a building because they decided.
Or above the clouds, and you lose GPS.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my favorite are the ones that are like, we're flying through Chicago, and then they say, oh, well, we couldn't have known that the signal would cut out as we went past a building, and then it returned to home and slammed to the side. That's the sort of stuff that it doesn't have to happen if you're safe about how you fly your quads.
As much as I would love having a pilot's license, I don't want to have to have one for flying my quad.
So stop messing it up. Do it right.
Alex would be fine with it, though.
He's pretty gonna fine.
He's
the guy who goes, I don't want to fly that. I fly the real thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is going to be the last Quadcopter episode we're going to have for
the
a
year.
While. Of the year. Yeah, definitely of the year. We've got another arc, a big arc coming up, because we've got to go into some of the more advanced topics. Once we start getting up to these 6, 7, 8, 10, 12-inch props, you're going to have to learn how to balance them. We're going to show you how to do that. We're going to show you a bit more about power systems. We're going to show you about some of the more cool things you can do with acro mode. So if you want to learn how to flip your quad or to do some crazy bank and yank turns, we're going to teach you how to do that. We're also doing builds. We're going to build a tricopter.
Oh, yeah.
We're building a junk copter. We're actually got a challenge where we're just going to scrounge to the basement, find something that we're going to turn into a quad.
I was wondering why all this styrofoam and stuff was piling up behind me. Yeah.
And actually, right now in the studio, we've got the guys from Game of Drones that make a practically indestructible quadcopter. So hopefully we'll get our hands on that and we'll prove them wrong.
Google search Game of Drones. I think it's gameofdrones.biz.
Yeah. Wow, Brian, that's been an awful lot of know-how in 2014.
Yeah, looking back on 2014, you can tell we had a good time doing this show.
We did, and you know what? I use the same standard for know-how that I do for when I celebrate Mass. As long as no one dies, it's been good.
As far as I'm aware, it's been all right.
It's been all right. Now we've got plenty planned for 2015, and it's not just quadcopters.
No.
We're actually doing another upgrade project. We're going to show you how you can get some crazy performance without spending a crazy amount of money. We've got some science projects. So we know that we're coming up to a time of the year where high school students and even a couple of grade school students are getting together their science fair type dealy bobs. We're going to show you some of our favorites, so maybe it'll give you a couple of ideas for something that you can do. Oh, and by the way,
what?
Yeah, quadcopters are coming back.
Well, yeah, because there's the next step in the quadcopter segment, which is FPV. Which is probably the coolest part of the Quadcopter series.
Which is freaking awesome person view.
And I'm planning on making beer because
we're gonna do and coffee,
that.
like the perfect cup of coffee.
Perfect cup of coffee. So we'll be featuring some food stuff in know-how because
one thing I noticed in those videos, I was so fat.
I don't know. I think it's all the cameras that we used to have.
A lot of cameras.
We've cut back on 2015.
Really folks, don't forget to stop by our show notes page because that's where you can find all of our previous episodes. If we've got a project that you want to check out, and by the way, our website's going to be changing this year to make it easier for you to search for projects, you got to stop by. Where can they find that, Brian?
That will always be and is twit.tv/KH. And I encourage all of you to go back, watch previous episodes, and check out the show notes if you had any questions about something.
Yeah, because we normally leave pretty detailed notes. So if you want to do the step-by-step, we've got it written up there. You don't have to watch over and over.
And all the links to where you can get the quadcopter parts or like the step-by-step stuff that we've done. So
because ultimately, the whole reason why we do this is
for the fans.
We want you to take these projects home, and that actually decides the kind of projects that we choose.
And there's a place for those people to display their stuff.
Exactly, they can do it on the Google Plus group, and that's where they go, and that's also where we pull our ideas. Just go to gplus.to/twitkh or jump onto Google Plus and search for know-how. Join the group. Make that your 2015 New Year's resolution, and who knows, maybe you're going to be connected with the next great maker, the next great DIYer, or maybe your project will end up right here on the show.
Definitely.
Yeah. And if you're not into Google Plus, we're also on the tweeters.
The tweeters.
You can find me at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ.
And I am at cranky_hippo.
Yeah, and don't forget that you can also find our TD, Alex Gumpel, at twitter.com/ANELF3. That's ANELF3. If you want to find out what he does to keep us on the rails, that's where you gotta go.
That's right.
Yeah. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balacer.
And I'm Brian Burnett.
And now that you know how,
go do it.
Bye-bye.